In this presentation, we shall look again at how different ballistic trajectories appear from a rotating frame, with less equations and more pictures. In previous presentations, we discussed this topic under the name of Coriolis force. But we discovered that deviation in the path of ballistic missiles fired from within the rotating frame and also being observed from the same rotating frame is mainly due to the angular momentum conservation, or equivalently due to vector addition of the tangential velocity of the rotating frame, and not due to the Coriolis effect. So we shall simply refer to these effects as observations from a rotating frame. Here we mainly discuss the 2D frame case. Eventually, in future videos, when we discuss the 3D case, we shall see that Coriolis force is one of the biggest misconceptions in meteorology, especially the idea of geostrophic balance, where we assume that the pseudo-Coriolis force balances the real pressure gradient force to produce circular motion in ocean and atmosphere. So this idea of geostrophic balance is deeply flawed. In this presentation, we see some reasons why it is a misconception. Let us quickly recap the vector notations and the coordinate system we use here. The mathematics has been discussed in a bit of detail in previous videos. You can just search for YouTube plus Neophysics with these quotation marks on Google to find our channel and videos, especially this video. Suppose this orange object be our frame of reference, and these dashed lines show the XY coordinate system and O is the origin. These solid black lines show the rotating frame. This uppercase omega is its rate of rotation or angular velocity. Anticlockwise rotation is treated as positive. We assume at time t equals 0, both the non-rotating frame and the rotating frame axis coincide, that they are co-located. So in time interval t, the rotating axis would have rotated by an angle omega t. This green object is the object under observation. It is at a radial distance r and makes an angle theta. So we can define the position of the moving object using a pair of variables r and theta. So the position vector r0 2d can be written as r0 2d equals r cos theta I plus sin theta j. So this is the observation as made from a non-rotating frame. The instantaneous unit vectors in the radial and tangential direction can be expressed as these. If in the non-rotating frame at time t, the angle is theta, then in the rotating frame, the angle measured at the same time instant t will be theta prime. That is, theta prime equals theta minus omega t. So in the rotating frame measurements, theta is replaced by theta prime. The position vector has the same form but with theta prime. The unit vectors also have the same forms but with theta prime. So vector r0 2d is the observation according to the non-rotating frame, and the position vector r subscript 2d is the observation according to the rotating frame. Suppose from the non-rotating frame we observe a force-free motion, that is acceleration is 0. Observed from a rotating frame, the acceleration term is not 0 anymore. On the right hand side of this acceleration expression, we find one Coriolis force term and a centrifugal force term. Similarly, if we see any forced motion in the inertial frame, for example, the motion under gravity, then we get this kind of expression. So this is the observation from a non-rotating frame. In the observation from a rotating frame, we again get one Coriolis force term and a centrifugal force term on the right hand side. Along with the original force term, so we get this. So we also get the original force term. So we get this minus gm by r square term. However, the directions are modified. The radial direction associated with gm by r square in the non-rotating frame becomes radial prime direction in the rotating frame. The best way to get the trajectories in these cases is by analytically solving the equations in the non-rotating frame and transforming the solution, that r theta, to get the rotating frame solutions, that is replacing theta by theta minus omega t. So let's begin with the force-free motion case. This is the acceleration as seen in the inertial frame. This implies that both the angular momentum is conserved and the net energy is also conserved. In fact, more universally, we find that it is these two conservation laws that are more fundamental. And this force or acceleration equation is only a concise representation of these conservation laws, which works in few special cases. That is, this kind of force equation can only solve a subset of all the problems solved by these two conservation laws. We can use this energy equation to find the solution R as a function of time t. So we get the time evolution of the radial distance in the non-rotating frame. Using the solution R in the angular momentum equation, we find the solution for theta. These are easy integrations, and we have discussed the derivations before. Finally, we do the transformation, that is, we find theta prime as theta minus omega t and get the solution in the rotating frame. The R solution remains the same, unchanged, only theta is transformed to theta prime. So now we are ready to plot the trajectories. Let's consider the simple case where we throw projectiles radially inwards towards the center from the periphery. So this is how the trajectories look from a non-rotating frame. The original projectiles are all being thrown in a non-rotating frame, and they are also being observed from a non-rotating frame. In this case, the angular momentum is 0. So this tan inverse term will become pi by 2, and overall theta will become a constant. That is, theta is not dependent on time. So the projectiles do not have any angular or rotational motion in this simple case. And the leading term inside this square root is 0. So r, the radial distance, increases or decreases with constant speed. Since the particles do not encounter any resistance as they move inwards, we could consider this central region as a zero pressure region. Basically, we are introducing these new particles in a region where there were none. The region was empty to begin with. Suppose now we observe these radially inward moving projectiles from a rotating frame. That is, the frame in which the experiment is being done is non-rotating, like we saw in the top panel, but the frame from which the observation is being done is rotating. Using the theta prime transformation, we get these new trajectories shown in the bottom panel. We see that if the projectile was fired towards the center in the inertial frame, the projectile appears to reach the center even from the rotating frame. There is no deviation in the actual or the intended path. Only the straight line path appears as curved now. That is, only the appearance is twisted. The path remains as it is. It hits the intended target or the location, and there is no deviation from the intended path. That is, from point X, if we intend to hit point Y, we will hit the target point Y without any deviation in the inertial frame. Only this straight line XY appears as this curve XY now in the rotating frame. These trajectories in the rotating frame includes the Coriolis factor, and it does not cause any deviation from the original path, because we are merely observing an experiment being done in an inertial frame, but observing that experiment from a rotating frame. The outcome of the experiment won't change, only the appearance is different. So these paths show that the Coriolis effect does not cause any deviation on its own. That is, we do not see any path deviation simply by observing the inertial frame motion from a rotating frame. Now let us conduct the same experiment, that is throwing particles radially inward but in a rotating frame. That is, the particles are part of a rotating frame before being thrown or fired. On the left, the experiment is being done in an inertial frame, and on the right, the experiment is being done in a rotating frame. So the experimental frame itself is rotating in an anti-clockwise direction in the right panel. But both the experiments are being observed from a non-rotating, that is an inertial frame. So the observation frame from where we are doing the observation, that is inertial, but the observed frame or where the experiment is being done, it's both rotating and not rotating. The angular momentum in the left panel case is 0 and the angular momentum on the right side is non-zero. Since the objects in the rotating frame have a tangential velocity component, the projectiles fired in the radial direction get added with this tangential velocity component and move in a resultant non-radial direction. In fact, all the intended radial projectiles now move tangential to some circle in the rotating frame. All the trajectories are tangential to the seance circle at the center. The radius of this inner circle is given by r min, that is the minimum radius. R min equals angular momentum divided by square root of 2 E naught m, where E naught is the net kinetic energy and m is the mass. So this R min depends both on angular momentum and the net energy terms. Basically, the trajectories cannot approach the origin closer than this length r min. This is the closest the projectiles can get to the origin O. And they all deviate. If the rotation of the experimental frame is anti-clockwise, then the deviation is towards the right. For example, in the inertial frame experiment, these two red paths meet each other at the center. But in the rotating frame experiment, they deviate to the right and are parallel to each other. They are both tangential to the seance circle at the center. Hence, they never reach the center, even though the intended path was towards the center radially. Basically, these solutions define a family of tangential lines, all tangential to the circle with radius r min. This is the main deviation we see in the path of projectiles, and it is due to angular momentum conservation. That is, they were intended to move towards the center, they were fired radially, but they are going tangentially. If there are a large number of particles being fired, that is, instead of the 6 particles we have here, suppose we had thousands of particles, and if the region around the circumference of the seance circle is densely packed with these particles, then it gives the illusion or the appearance that the particles are all on a circular trajectory with radius r min. Our brains imagine a continuous circular path at r min because there are all particles present on the circumference, even though the particles just touch and go along their tangential paths. This illusory circular motion is shown as the grey circular arrows. This is also the reason we see anti-clockwise or cyclonic motion in the northern hemisphere when the earth rotates anti-clockwise. Since no trajectory extends within the r min circle, no particles are found within this circular region with this kind of initialization that we discussed. So, we can consider that a low pressure system or a zero pressure system is maintained at the core. And there will be an associated pressure gradient between the core region and the periphery as seen in the rotating frame experiment. But here, there are no Coriolis force terms. Yet, we see the trajectories deviate from the intended radial path. This deviation effect is entirely due to angular momentum conservation and not due to the Coriolis effect. So let us now look at how the rotating frame experiment is seen from a rotating frame with the same rate of rotation. How does it look? Or equivalently, the projectiles are being fired from a rotating frame and are also being observed from the same rotating frame. Essentially, these tangential straight lines that we saw from the non-rotating frame appear as these curved lines from a rotating frame now. That is, this blue straight line appears as this blue curved line, and this red straight line appears as this red curved line, and so on. So these curved trajectories can never form a closed loop. We can get a closed loop if by the time the projectile goes from one end of the chord to the loop. We can get a closed loop if by the time the projectile goes from one end of the chord to the other, the corresponding rotating point in the experimental frame also reaches the other end. Say the projectile goes from point X to point Y. So if by that time the rotating point X, so this frame itself is rotating, so the point that was coexisting with the initial point of the projectile, that will be rotating. So if that point reaches the point Y while traveling along the arc while rotation, then we get a loop. Because there will be a coincidence. The projectile meets the rotating frame at the same point, at the origin. So then we get a closed loop. But the straight line length xy is shorter than the arc length xy. And the speed along the line xy is faster than the tangential speed along the arc xy. Hence, the projectile will always take less time to travel along the line xy than the time taken by moving point at the periphery to reach y. Here, v is the radial launch velocity of the projectile and u is the tangential velocity due to the rotating frame of the experiment. The inner Cyan circle is often confused as being formed due to a balance between the pressure gradient and the Coriolis force. This is totally wrong physics, because we see the Cyan circle even from the inertial frame observation, where there is no Coriolis factor. This circular motion is illusory because no single particle is traveling on that circular path. Only with a large collection of particles, it appears like a circular motion. It is an emergent illusion due to a collective behavior. But in scientific literature, this illusory circular motion is thought of as real, and it forms as a result of the balance between the pressure gradient and the Coriolis force. We have shown that it forms even in the absence of the Coriolis force, because we see it from an inertial frame as well. As long as the experimental frame is rotating, we get the circle. It is not dependent on the rotation rate of the observation frame. So, trying to dispel some of the confusions prevalent in the ideas about Coriolis effect, this bad Coriolis page from psu.edu explained that the Coriolis force causes a moving object to experience a force to the right of its path in the northern hemisphere. So basically all this launched, these four trajectories which are launched, they are deviating towards right because of the Coriolis force. So the Coriolis force acts towards right in the northern hemisphere if the earth is rotating anti-clockwise. So it is, but it is not correct that this necessarily produces a clockwise rotation. The direction of rotation, if at all, depends upon the net force, not just on a single force. So basically, if it was an individual cannonball or a particle fired, then it would have a clockwise bent, clockwise deviation. But that may not be true always. In the presence of other forces, the curve will change. So one must distinguish between the direction of deviation caused by the Coriolis force operating on its own. So on its own, it operates on the to deviate the trajectory towards right, and the direction of rotation when other forces are present. So for example, when the pressure gradient is present. The illustration shows a situation for a northern hemisphere low. So the central region where L is written, it's a low pressure region. All around it, we have a higher pressure region. The Coriolis force, CF, shown by these red arrows, does indeed point to the right of the flow. But it is slightly overbalanced by the pressure gradient force, PGF, all these blue lines pointing towards the center. So these blue lines are the pressure gradient force, these red are the red arrows are the Coriolis force. And the final curve we see is supposed to be the balance between these two forces, Coriolis and the pressure gradient. So they argue in the textbooks that this is what causes the counterclockwise rotation. On its own, if it was a single particle without any pressure gradient, we would see a clockwise kind of deviation. But because there is pressure gradient at the center, we would get a counterclockwise rotation. A good way to convince yourself of this behavior is to watch the direction of rotation seen in radar and satellite loops of storms. It is very easy to see the counterclockwise rotation around the low pressure areas in the northern hemisphere storms. So basically we see this in the data, but how do we explain that? That is the question. So they think it is real, but according to our calculation, it's an illusory circular motion that is created. So basically this is what the textbook explanation as to how the counterclockwise rotation is formed at the center. So according to the textbooks, the real particles are actually moving around this circle, just like how moon rotates around the earth. But we showed that this is an illusion. But there are situations described in scientific literature when the balance is not between the Coriolis force and the pressure gradient. For example, in the case of inertial rotations, where we see these kinds of clockwise rotations dominate according to textbooks. So this is a popular picture found in many textbooks while explaining the inertial rotations. So this is a schematic representation of inertial circles of air masses in the absence of other forces. So so basically what this means is if these are all like independent trajectories, like individual particles being fired or cannonballs being fired. So this indicates that if we fire these cannonballs, then they acquire a kind of clockwise rotation because of the Coriolis force on its own, in the absence of any other force. Note that the rotation is exactly opposite of that normally experienced with air masses in weather systems around the depressions. So if there was a depression here, then in the previous slides we saw that there will be a counterclockwise rotation, and here it is a clockwise rotation, hence it is opposite. Again, this is what the textbooks say. In our calculations, the ballistic trajectories or the cannonballs can never go around in such circles. They can never form these loops. These inertial rotations are reported in the 2D experiments as well. For example, in this report on rotating table experiment, so the title of the report is Inertial Circles Visualizing the Coriolis Force, GFD4. So GFD is Geophysical Fluid Dynamics. So this is a course by John Marshall, and we have taken this from MIT OCW, the Open Courseware page. So they took a parabolic rotating frame and let some objects, for example an ice puck, move on it. Seen from an inertial frame, the trajectory of the puck seems somewhat elliptical. But seen from the rotating frame, the trajectory appears to have these loopy structures. So they call it the inertial circles. But they are really epicycles. They are same as the epicycles we see in astronomy, specifically in the geocentric paths of planetary orbits. This is how the elliptical orbits of different planets look when seen from a rotating Earth, that is relative to us Earthlings. So these epicycles are the result of watching an elliptic orbit from a rotating Earth frame. If the intended paths are simple straight lines, like the radially oriented lines we have been discussing, we would never get these loops. Only when the original path as seen from a non-rotating frame is elliptical or some closed form path, then we get these epicycles or inertial loops. In fact, depending on the actual period of rotation of the elliptical orbits and the rate of rotation of the observing frame, we get various kinds of epicyclic loops. When the eccentricity is low, the observing frame rotation is close to the period of the circular orbit, then the and corresponding to the semilatus rectum, that is r naught is the semilatus rectum of the elliptical orbit, and omega naught is the angular velocity of the circular orbit r naught. Then we get these loops similar to the experimental results from MIT. This black curve is a curve with radius r naught, and the angular velocity omega naught. It has angular velocity omega naught. This is the lowest energy solution for the given angular momentum. If we disturb the black orbits by giving it more energy at the same angular momentum, that is without changing the angular momentum, then we get eccentric elliptic orbits. In this case, we have the eccentricity as 0.2. So this green curve is the path we see in an inertial frame. If we are in a frame rotating with omega naught, then we see this red curve. That is, green curve is what we observe from a non-rotating frame, and red is what we observe from a rotating frame. So the green curve starts here and ends here during our observation period. Then in the same time interval, the red curve starts here and ends up here on a different path. So on the right panel, the red curve shows one complete cycle. The red curve starts here and ends here. The blue curve or the second cycle starts where the red curve ends and goes around like this. This is the second cycle. And this cyan curve shows the third cycle, and so on. Hence we get these epicycles or inertial circles. When eccentricity is high, the periodicities are different, then we may get different kinds of weird loops. But again, these are not relevant for the simple radially oriented trajectories we have been discussing, and also not relevant to the convergent divergence kind of motion relevant to the weather and climate. So these are totally different cases. Let's get back to our original discussion. So based on our calculations, we can conclude that 1. The Coriolis effect on its own cannot create any path deviation. We see the same intended path generated in the non-rotating frame, but in a twisted way. That is, projectile fired towards the center in the inertial frame reach the center even when observed from the rotating frame without any deviation in the target location. But in a curved manner, they reach in a curved manner. We do not see any path deviation simply by observing the inertial frame motion from a rotating frame. 2. The main path deviation is due to angular momentum conservation. This counterclockwise circular motion at the center is illusory. No particle is moving along this circle. The particles just touch and go tangentially to this circle. But in textbooks, this circular motion is considered real. This circle we see even from the non-rotating frame. Hence, we do not need the Coriolis effect to balance the pressure gradient. So that idea, geostrophic idea, is completely wrong physics. That this kind of circle is formed because of a balance between Coriolis effect and some other force. These tangential paths, when seen from a rotating frame, never form inertial circles or loops. Even that is wrong physics. Individual cannonballs fired from a rotating frame and observed from a rotating frame never form closed loops like inertial circles or epicycles. So that's it. We end the discussion here. It would be surprising if weather and climate models make any right prediction with so much wrong math and physics coded into them. So thank you. If you want to understand the concepts of physics in the clearest way, regardless of concerns about scoring high marks in exams, please visit neophysics.com. Thank you.